Welcome back, everyone. As I promised you, we have Jesse Weber. He is standing outside of the courtroom. He has been inside the Weinstein case from the very beginning. The jury's been deliberating, as you know, since Tuesday. Jesse, you are a fixture in that courtroom, and I understand that Gloria Allred herself gave you a compliment. Is that true? Is everyone getting to know you now?
Sorry, Terry, you've been breaking up a little bit. Just to let you know, yeah, whole lot of nothing's been going on today. We didn't hear from one jury note. They didn't put any note out. There's been nothing really going on in the courtroom. It's just 80 reporters waiting for this phone to ring. There's a phone, there's a buzzer in the courtroom, which would indicate that a jury has a note or a possible verdict. And nothing's going on. Even Harvey Weinstein's not even waiting in the courtroom. He's actually waiting in an adjacent room. His attorneys are coming in and out of the court. We've had a chance to talk to them a little bit, but really nothing. So that seems to indicate, excuse me, seems to indicate at this point that the jury is ultimately deliberating, but they don't have any questions yet. They don't want any new evidence. Now, as we know from yesterday, they were going to be reviewing today a collection of emails from Miriam Haley. They were going to be reviewing as well as communications regarding Annabella Shora. It seems, based upon their questions from yesterday, that they are still focusing on those two accusers, which make up the first two counts in the verdict sheet. No indication that they have considered Jessica Mann or have even moved on to Jessica Mann.
You know, that's interesting. I was going to ask you, yesterday they asked so many questions, and instead of giving the jury the answers to those questions or giving them the actual physical evidence, the judge had everything read back to them. Maybe they were a little bit discouraged by that and thought it would take too long, and maybe now they're just not asking any questions. Do you think that's a possibility?
So, Terry, again, I'm sorry, a lot of this is breaking up, but I believe you were asking about the read back. Yeah, I mean, look, what were they looking for in the read back of Rosie Perez's testimony? What were they looking back for in the read back of Miriam Haley's direct examination and cross-examination? Who knows? Who knows what the answers are lurking in that testimony? But you have to imagine that if you're the prosecution and the defense, perhaps that they didn't present their case clear enough. Perhaps there was something that they didn't ask that they needed to ask. Perhaps there was something that was not memorable in the way this testimony went down. Or perhaps this jury just wants to be reminded of what both these witnesses ultimately had to say. Clearly, they were looking for something. They were looking for something with respect to Miriam Haley, the way she testified about the alleged sexual assault in 2006, as well as this consensual sexual encounter she had with Harvey Weinstein at the Tribeca Grand Hotel. Clearly, they were looking for something in Rosie Perez's account, who is one of the only witnesses to corroborate the story of Annabella Shora. You'll recall that Rosie Perez testified that Annabella Shora told her she was raped, but it was Rosie Perez who put two and two together and figured out that that was Harvey Weinstein, a critical witness for the state. But this jury seems to be wanting both sides, because it's not like they just asked for the direct examination of Miriam Haley or Rosie Perez, but they also wanted the cross-examination as well. So they're trying to hear both sides, both arguments, but who knows what they're looking for.
All right, Jesse, thank you so much for giving us all of that information. And when there's more than a nothing burger, we will come back for additional information. Thanks again, Jesse. All right. I'm going to turn. All right, I'm going to turn to my guest here. I have Latonia, who's still on Skype. I have Taylor, who is here in the room. And, you know, based on what Jesse was just saying there, I'm not really sure if the jury wants to ask any more questions. Maybe they're thinking that they asked enough questions yesterday and they just want to get along with deliberating. Do you think?
Well, you know, it's interesting because juries don't understand the legal ramifications of asking a question. How the judge can't just say, oh, well, here's the answer. That readbacks are normally the cure to almost every answer. And when you have a readback, it is time consuming. It is sometimes extremely boring, especially if the jury is just looking for one small little thing. Now, they can refine their questions with laser-like precision to try to get to the exact issue. But what happens is, if the jurors can't agree on what they want to hear, then they have to hear everything. The whole direct, the whole cross, and all of a sudden you have days of readbacks. So they might be a little hesitant to pull the trigger on another question for fear that they will be sitting listening to readbacks for days to come.
That makes a lot of sense to me. LaTonya, let me ask you this question. Why can't the judge just give them what they want? You know, they asked about definitions on consent. They asked about forcible compulsion. Why can't the judge just say, here are the definitions and here's the transcript. You read it, you figure out what parts you might need instead of reading the entire transcript and having it, you know, take so much time and effort?
Because at this point in time, one, the judge can't look like he's giving weight to any particular bit of information. And then two, he's giving them everything that they need or that they're supposed to use for consideration. He's already given them what the jury charges are that were agreed on by both parties at that point. There's nothing else that he can give. And much like Taylor was saying, for it to be the most fair way, you read the entire thing. You don't do bits and pieces. You do the whole thing, and it'll be up to them to determine what is important for the questions that they ask. Maybe it helps them and maybe it doesn't, but they ultimately have to be able to make these decisions on their own with the information that is given to them.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, Taylor, one of the things that Jesse reported earlier was the fact that, you know, we still have these alternate jurors. They're not sitting in deliberation. They are walking around and they are on hold, basically, if the judge has to call them back. I've always thought, why not just have them sit through deliberations and then just not take the vote? We don't do that here in New York. Do you think it's a good idea to send them off? Don't you think there's some exposure that they might have looking at the press, actually?
Well, hopefully they're being sequestered so that they can't see the press. But what happens is if a juror leaves and if both sides agree on putting in an alternate, deliberations are supposed to regress and start back at day one, moment one. If I'm the defense, I'm already telling the court, I'm not agreeing to anybody. I'm not agreeing to any of the alternates sitting in. Let's cut them loose and let them go home, because if someone falls off this jury, we're headed towards a mistrial. So I'm not sure if the judge is making them keep them or if he believes that somehow he can impose his will and force the defense into accepting an alternate. But if I'm the defense right now, I'm making it crystal clear, none of the alternates are acceptable to me if somebody falls off this jury. And it will be a hung jury if that happens. Send them home. Let them go. And then, by the way, we could get some actual insight into what those alternate jurors have been thinking, because then they're free to talk to the press.
That makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you, LaTonya, what is your view, real quick, on alternates? Do you think they should stay or go?
So they shouldn't be in there while they're doing the deliberation. Absolutely not. I think that at that point in time, whatever may happen, you don't need them having their opinions coming in if they're not going to actually be a part of it. So that would be kind of what I would think about it. And then at the same time, I'm kind of like Taylor, because I've been the defense attorney also. You're going to say, let them go. You want them out of there for this purpose because you want to be able to ask for that mistrial if you are the defense attorney. So it becomes a two-edged sword one way or the other.
Right, exactly. You know, interestingly enough, I don't know, if I were sitting there, I would probably want as many alternate, jurors as possible so you don't get a mistrial. LaTonya Hines out of Atlanta, Georgia, I've got to thank you and sign you off now. And when we come back, we will have more on all of the cases that we are following. Weinstein, Pardon, Burns, all of the cases that you want to watch here on Law and Crime.